right, welcome. I'm Chase from On the Table Gaming, and I'm excited to be here to facilitate today's Q&A session for the upcoming TCG project, Sorcery Contested Realm. I'm here with Erik Olofsson, the game creator for Sorcery Contested Realm, as well as the community manager, Simon Swan. So this has been a labor of love for a long time in the making. For those who are just tuning in, Erik, what is Sorcery Contested Realm?
It is a card game that uses a tactical square grid, and it's quite heavily focused on sort of old school hand-painted art and iconic design. So it also uses several artists from like Dungeons and Dragons and that kind of thing. So it's something of a retro card game that uses modern design sensibilities.
I think even just seeing some of the art myself, it was like immediately recognizable, like scratch something from the memories of my youth, and just seems so iconic right off the bat. So, we've drafted for today a series of questions from the already growing sorcery community. As community manager, Simon, what drew you to this project, and what are you most excited about?
It's a good question. Ultimately, I was drawn to this project because I'm a big fan of these types of projects, TCGs, collectible card games. I'm a bit of a hoarder when it comes to this type of stuff. Probably come from the element of collectability rather than playability. But I think that I have the similar experience that a lot of other people did with Sorcery. I saw the cards and I thought to myself, wow, that's different. That's really what I wanted to see. I think what we're seeing a lot these days is a lot of digital art that features in games. And I think that although that's it's very distinctive and it's absolutely amazing, I miss what we had before. So that's what drew me to the project. And ultimately, I got involved by saying to Erik, I really love what you're doing. How can I help? And ultimately, I know, Chase, we've worked together in the past. We've curated some communities, and so it felt like a natural fit. So today I'm a community manager and help out with the Discord and also speaking to content creators.
Well, fantastic. And speaking of the community, without further ado, let's get into looking at some of the questions that you have curated from the community, specifically from the Discord. And if people want to find out more about Sorcery Contested Realm, the Discord is already active, quite active, and people can jump in there to have these interactions and ask questions and pose this for future videos like this. So let's pull up our first question here and get right into it. Now, I'm going to try as we go through and get these names as close to correct as possible. I may be tested as we go through. So starting off with what I believe is Hamburgisa, what is the long-term plan for Sorcery? I have the impression from other interviews that it is currently a side project for those developing it. What do developers see as the path to a TCG that actively exists 5, 10, or 20 years from now? Erik, could you speak to that?
Yes. Well, first of all, I can say that given the incredible interest in Sorcery so far by just anyone that sees it, it helped in the decision to now go full-time on Sorcery. So I'm kind of preparing for success there. But I guess creating a sort of mainstay in the card game business and a really high quality product that is unique that you can't get elsewhere, that would be a personal goal of me. And this is also, it's a labor of love project. So I would definitely keep chipping on it and make it better and better, almost regardless of what the situation is.
Fantastic. Also, we have another one here from Collector Art House, Mike. At the time of Path of Exile and its release, it was the right place, the right time, and the right product. Do you feel the same is true for Sorcery? And maybe what differentiator does it have, and what niche does this game serve?
Well, times are quite different comparing back to the days of Path of Exile, but there are also very big similarities. So what actually made me see that or like what made me realize that Path of Exile was going to be a hit was when we presented it in PAX East in the US. And we were this very small indie studio, and you could just see people's eyes sort of lighting up when they saw the screen that we had put on the wall. And we had like a lot more people coming and looking at our game compared to established publishers at the time, while we were some guys out of a garage, basically. But I really do get a similar feel with Sorcery, and that comes a lot from just the incredible kind of word of mouth growth and like people on Discord, and I guess people like Simon contacting me through just seeing the project and being really excited about it. I get a lot of emails like that. So obviously the situation is different compared to like a game conference like that. And now it's just online on Facebook and Discord, but it definitely feels like there's a big sort of gap in the market, and a lot of people want exactly this.
I think I can chip in here as well, coming from that kind of like perspective of looking out for all these different types of projects. In fact, actually, I like the previous version of this question. I'm just going to read this here. So Mike sent another question, and Mike does some fantastic work, by the way. He's got an absolutely amazing website which features a lot of the cards and the art from Sorcery. We'll make sure we put it in the source in the show notes. So please go there. But the previous question was, let's have a look. In the early PoE development, Erik was fresh out of college in Hungary, but now he is secure, successful and secure. I think it's a case of whenever you start a new business, especially if it's born of passion, you really need to make sure that you do a lot of the hard work. We're quite lucky with Sorcery because Erik has devoted, I think, the last 3 years in terms of developing the art, but certainly a little bit longer than that developing the game itself. So it's incredibly mature at this stage for a product which is presented to Kickstarter. Through that, I think a lot of the community have picked up on that. When we sort of discuss the game, there are resources available such as a print and play version of the game, and also available on Tabletop Simulator as well. So I think that we're already seeing how people are being drawn to this particular type of project. But fundamentally for me, it was because it was this sort of curated boutique type game where the cards looked great, it was very thematic, and I just really enjoyed experiencing the game overall with friends.
And, I think you mentioned the game being so mature, and with that, people are already like looking ahead to it, right? And we're not even at the Kickstarter yet. Do you plan, the Platinum Prince asking, do you plan on having tournaments at LGSs or potentially national tournaments, or do you kind of prefer to have this stay out of the realm of the competitive scene? What do you see as the future for this?
So the main focus of the game is more of a casual kitchen table game. I would start in that end, and I think that's also the healthy way to get a lot of players. But with that said, the sort of game design system has an incredible depth to it, and for people that want to play in a skilled way, there would be a lot of room. Like it's one of those games that it's just extremely dynamic and sort of skill intense, even though you could just play it in a casual way. So it'll be interesting to see what people come up with. And we're also in a situation where we can react quite fast to create tournaments if that is something that actually takes off.
You look at a lot of things which are competitive. There's such things like speed running in video games. Games weren't designed to do it, but people find the competitive aspect. There's competitive eating. So basically, there's so much that you can do to make things competitive. But I think fundamentally, we need to get the project right in terms of the feel, which is that sort of kitchen table feel. I'm sure, given the depth and the nature of the product itself, people will then actually turn their sights to a competitive type of a framework. But then we kind of feel it needs to be done in collaboration with the community as well. We don't want to put something in place here which is something where we feel that maybe the community would do a better job in establishing exactly how that was. The game itself stands alone, but that said, sometimes people can work with it. A good example would be something like Commander for Magic the Gathering, where people actually created that format and it's very, very successful.
Speaking of challenging names here, I think it's Frost Ito, maybe, is asking how and when the first, what was the genesis of Sorcery? How long did this process take to make a coherent lore? Were there card games, board games, books, movies, or even real stories that inspired the creation of Sorcery?
To take the story from the beginning, I started out with just commissioning art from kind of old Magic the Gathering artists, and that was to do sort of custom Magic card design, like I did. And I'm also a huge old school Magic player, so I made these kind of alternate universe cards where I had this card that was like a mix between Ancestral Recall and Mind Twist, for example. 1 black mana, force your opponent to discard 3 cards. Completely broken, but that's kind of how old school works. But then at some point I figured, like, why not actually make a card game from this? And at that time it was still very, very much like Magic, but back then I also had some ideas like the rarity system. Like, for example, you have some cards that are unique, you can only have one in the deck, just because you get that kind of boomy game experience of that. Like, you can draw your cool card, it can happen. But then I actually went so far as I commissioned a bunch of art for the game at that stage. But at the time I got talking to this guy, Nicholas, that is the other kind of original game designer of the game. And he had a bunch of ideas of what could be done to the game. And things like 3 years ago now, probably, I went to visit him in the US, and he presented this kind of just a paper, like just written on paper cards, and he had his square grid type game system. And it was just like, actually going there, I was like, Sai, he's gonna have this, like, I don't know, some game design stuff, and then I'm gonna have to say no, and kind of annoying. But I could see, like, halfway through the first game, it was like, yeah, this is awesome. This has some great moments in it, and there was things in that game that really sold me, like the Pudge Butcher. Like, he had this big minion that it cast this hook to like hook a minion, and they had this this site on the square grid that flew around. Cloud City is in the game still, so, and it was just very fun and to explore, and it's kind of a completely new game design system that just sort of triggers the imagination. So you just kind of want to explore it and see what the cards made, like where things would be taken. You sort of keep designing for it. So that's when it kind of became a game in its own at that point. And it was still very far off from being a complete game. Like, for example, we had sites in the game were still vertical. So you had this like gigantic stacks of minions and sites on top of each other, and it was completely impossible to see what was going on. But it was still fun, and we found a lot of like game design solutions to those things after that. So yeah, from then on it just went on, and like commissioned more and more art, and yeah, sort of chipped away at it, like 2 hours a night for another couple of years. Yeah, that's the very beginning, at least.
See, one of those things is quite interesting, the way that the issue with the sites, the Atlas cards, which were portrait rather than landscape, the fix for that was actually much better for the art as well, because you can actually get sort of panoramas. You can actually get the landscape cards looking to have more of the art in there as well.
There's something about like site or land cards actually being landscape format. Like there's a reason why paintings are like that. It just looks better. So
Yeah.
Well, and I think that's something that immediately comes across, sort of as the attention and the love of the art. And actually, Collector Art House, Mike again here, has another great question. So art has clearly been a major focus for Sorcery, but would you consider it the top focus?
well, yes and no, I would say. Like the art it has a prime focus because a lot of things start with the art, and a lot of cards get designed kind of with the art as the starting point. But there's also always a back and forth between the art and design. Like you get the design idea, and then you get the art, and then the art influences the design a bit. And you also need kind of simple and clear and sort of epic card designs for the art to be inspiring as well. So that's been, so the design is very driving in that sense. Like I don't like giving this kind of super complicated sort of game design effect to an artist. Like I much prefer to be able to say like, okay, it's these like aggressive augurs, and then they can take it from there. So it's more like, it's sort of a distilled idea that goes into both the art and the design, if that makes sense. So I don't really think you can quite separate the game design and the art so easily, even though the art is an obvious kind of elevator pitch kind of thing that people see right away, and I'll happily push that everywhere, of course.
And then we have Overo. Can we expect in future sets further famous artists from vintage Magic the Gathering?
Yes. I like to keep a mix of artists where there would be some sort of old like Dungeons and Dragons artists, and some old MTG artists, and also some new up and coming artists, and artists from other genres like metal band cover artists, that kind of thing. But in general, like there's a lot of cool stuff to explore when it comes to the art, and I have a lot of ideas, but yeah, should probably, Simon would tell me to not share too much here.
Yeah, and actually that's quite a clever question, because the question really wasn't about the art there. It was the question was future sets. So that's kind of snuck under the radar a little bit. So I think that's all we're going to say at this time.
Fair enough. All right. So then from David P, how long does each art piece on average take to commission? I'd imagine the artist must have been excited to work traditionally for a card game project. What's that been like?
It's very varied, the amount of time it takes for artists. It depends on the medium as well. So that's one of the main differences compared to my computer game work. It's that things really take its time with the hand painted art, and you can't easily correct mistakes and so on. It's more like what is kind of is in a way. And what was the second part of that question?
I'd imagine the artist must have been excited to work traditionally for a card game project. So, can we take a quick snapshot? So how is the art being made? For maybe people just tuning in who have no idea, how is the art being made for this particular card game?
Oh, well, one of the things with this game is that I don't give very precise art direction, because I want the art. I want many different art styles in the game, and I also want the sort of ideas to come from the artists as well. So it's like you get the sort of creativity and the imagination from many different people instead of a sort of single art directed thing that is like exactly this way and nothing can sort of be different from that, which that can be a good thing. But I think there's kind of a lack of this more sort of open-ended thing that is more of a sort of exploration of like art and cards, and less of a kind of creating my own IP. It's a tricky question, but I think it's about giving, like, people should use their own imagination when they play, and the artists should use their own imagination. It shouldn't all come and be sort of spoon-fed to them from one source, I think.
That's a good point. Another thing I've noticed with the cards is when you play the game, because it's come from many different sources, the visual cues when they play in the game is very, very strong. Because the cards come from different artists, they all look very different. Obviously, they come together in a fantastic sort of cohesive collection. But that said, the cards are different enough that when you glance at it, you know what you're doing. If you're looking at the board state, you look down and you think, there's my Pudge Butcher. You just know where it is straight away. Everything's been designed in such a way that when you see the Pudge Butcher, you know kind of what the Pudge Butcher does. And so that memory really helps the gameplay as well. But a lot of games that I've sort of played and collected, there is like this slight homogenization of the art itself. And thematically, that's fantastic. But it does struggle a little bit with the visual sort of cueing when you're actually playing the game itself to actually recognize a card easily. So I think that Sorcery certainly has tackled that. And when people play it, they'll see for themselves.
Fantastic. We have another one here from Collector Art House from Mike. How did you determine which artists or artworks would get which card rarities? Was this pre-planned, or was it more flexible and dynamic than that?
I wish there was a perfect plan from the beginning, but that's not quite how the game design process works. Like, often cards change in rarity, and there's certain things like the most rare cards in the game. Like, I tend to like, there's a bigger chance that they get more detail on the art than common cards, for example. But I don't really want a hard rule there either, because that can, well, going back to the last question, it can kind of become a bit sort of samey, and as like, it's a good thing if it's a little bit unexpected as well when it comes to that. But with that said, like, the artists are specifically chosen to have like a very wide variety of styles and techniques as well. So I would say it's not so much tied to the rarity specifically, but more about just generally throughout the entire game, creating a very sort of wide, like a big variety.
I think I can add to that in terms of the sort of variety or rarities of cards within the game. The system allows for what we call ordinary cards. There's elite, exceptional, and unique cards. The rarity itself is not necessarily the rarity that will be in the product. It's how many you can actually use within your deck. And so that's a distinguishing feature of this particular game. So if you have ordinary cards, you're able to have 4 of those in a deck. So you want to add those for things like consistency to enable you to ramp into the game. Whereas if you have a unique card, these are going to be some of the showcase cards, which really help dictate the tone of the game, help you tell the story as well.
Fantastic. So, when it comes to the art, it's actually really easy, especially with this game, to get wrapped up in the world and the setting of the game, just based off the beautiful artwork itself. Are there any particular card interactions or game design elements that help create their own stories, or maybe potentially set up like memorable interactions when you're playing the game?
Oh yeah, so I already told the Pudge Butcher story in the beginning, how that created an awesome moment. But I can give a bit more detail there, I guess. So you have this big fat slob monster that is casting a hook to hook one of the opponent's smaller minions. But then the opponent can cast dodge roll. So he dodges that smaller minion to the side, and the pudge then instead accidentally hooks some other larger minion behind that original one that he targeted. So then the hook basically backfires, and now the opponent has to deal with this this other big minion that just defeated his butcher, and it's right in his face, in his territory. So there can be things like that. And you can also get this kind of funny juxtaposition of kind of really small common or ordinary creatures. Like you have this this dromedar creature, this camel. It's just a common card, costs almost nothing to play, but then it can carry this Doomsday Device that deals 20 damage when it detonates. So you have this little camel coming with a Doomsday Device towards your opponent, and he has to sort of desperately try to get out of the way or kill the camel before it gets there.
I mean, that's one of the things that just hooked me when I got to do my first demo game, and we were playing. The Punch Butcher showed up, and just playing and just be grinning ear to ear as these like unexpected things came up that just was so much fun. How about you, Simon? Anything stand out?
Yeah, I've tried to be clever with the Doomsday Device by picking it up with my avatar and moving it around the board. Don't do that. Basically, your opponent would just move away. And another time, well, when I did it, my opponent played, I think it was Great Wall, which actually stops things moving into their space, and it creates like a line that you can't cross. You have to work around it. You get 3 turns before the Doomsday Device goes off. So the clock was ticking. There was nothing I can do. However, there is a mechanism called Death's Door, and this is important to know. Actually, we're going to get a little bit into the game itself here, but with Death's Door, what happens is that when your avatar goes down to 0 health, then you have the ability to basically have one more turn, at which time your opponent has to finish you off. So the game doesn't finish when you first hit 0. You're at Death's Door, and then the next turn you need to do something. Now, there's cards like Angel's Egg, which can go ahead and sort of replenish some of your health. So there are things you can do just to hang on and save yourself just for a little bit. But it's always, when you get down to that, that's where things become desperate. That's where the game starts ramping up, and this is where you want to start pulling out your really big cards.
And let's take another question here. We have from 5. What is and what will be the most challenging part of this project? Will it be rules, balance, art, production, scaling, tracking the success, or other things?
Well, I hope that the success is so big that it will be hard to even track. But well, I would say rules have been quite a big problem, or like it was a very daunting task. But luckily, we have someone that also came from Discord that is actually working full time on that as a full-time employee for the company. So we hopefully have that solved. But yeah, we will see. Scaling, if the Kickstarter is successful, that will be an interesting challenge, but also sounds fun. So, but the Kickstarter is always the first step. So I guess we'll first have to focus on getting that one big and successful, and then I'll think about that. But yeah,
these are all good challenges to have. If the leading indicator is success, and then these things are things you have to deal with, then this should be pleasurable. But I think that fundamentally, because this comes from a place of passion, this is Erik's sort of brainchild, and he's been working on it for so long. It's what we want to do. We believe in this game, and we wanted to have fun with it, and want to do more and more with it. If you're talking about things like production, then sometimes where you have to work with third parties, that's a sort of pathway that we need to actually get ahead of. We need to start having those discussions now. We have certainly had many discussions in that regard to allow us to understand how it is to enter the market with a TCG, to educate ourselves, and to work and grow as a company to bring in resources that can help with that. As Erik said, obviously Kickstarter is our main goal right now. And it's a lofty goal. We have a lot to share with the community, and we really want people to enjoy the game. So we remain sort of laser focused on that. But I can tell folks there's a whole bunch of stuff going on in the background where we're talking to different people just to move on and trying to figure out really what the future for the game could look like. So nothing happens in isolation. Everything's happening together.
Makes sense. Wow, this one's actually a helpful one here. Thank you, Will T, for having a somewhat normal name. I hopefully I got that right. That was the easiest the name of the
Wilt.
set.
Yeah.
Wilt. Oh, sorry. Is it Wilt? Will T. There are bound to be unexpected effects between cards. Are you planning on a rotation or other methods to keep the game playing with your desired intention?
That's a it's a tough question because it looks so far into the future. But I would say that the pace of releases it would be slower, but also the rarity system in the game it does kind of lend itself to be a little bit more resilient to cards that have a higher power, just because of you have unique cards that only have one card, for example. But also with that said, like sorcery, some cards are supposed to be quite boomy, so I would say that it's part of the experience, even though we would of course take away like I don't know, broken combos that just ends the game. And yeah, but this is of course where we also need help with playtesting on places like Tabletop Simulator. Yeah, do you have anything to add there, Simon?
Yeah, so obviously Erik comes from a video game background, and I think it's fair to say whenever you design a project like this and you test it and you go through multiple iterations, there's no real replacement for actually having it tested at scale by your customer base. I can tell you right now that many card games that I follow, people are saying, have you seen this combo? This is fantastic. And this is really fundamentally how things like metas are built out with games, that people see these powerful combos. If you look at vintage Magic, you have engines which you create with the cards themselves, which facilitate this. And so it becomes a game about efficiency. Not only are you playing against your opponent, but you're playing your deck in the most efficient, most effective manner possible. So I think it's inevitable. Now, I'm sure many people are aware there's many different mechanisms for us to control this, which are pervasive in card games today. You know, people talk about sort of things like set rotations or minor changes to the cards, etc. I think fundamentally, however, we want to be really careful about how you approach this. This is our first entry into the market. We have a great deal of confidence in the work we've done so far, but we really want to make this a collaborative type project. The community are incredibly important when it comes to this feedback. And so as Erik's saying, if anybody wants to play test or contribute, please let us know. We really want to hear from you, because as much as we can do a lot to extol the virtues of the project, it's incredibly important that our fans feel valued as well, and they do that on our behalf.
Makes sense. And then we have another one here from To the X, or perhaps Toothy X. I'm not sure.
Toothex.
Toothex. Is there a specific chase card that will identify with the set the most? If so, how rare would it be to pull? Or will all cards be distributed similarly, comparing to a Lotus from another game we all know and love? But that's pretty rare. Who would ever have that? That's who.
Yeah, so I would say that there isn't like a card that's specifically made to be the Lotus of this game, but that instead would be something to be discovered by the players. Just because the game with the square grid and the game design, like it's so new, so it's quite hard to know exactly what will be the kind of powerful chase thing that people do. And I think that's I don't know, having that sort of emerge organically seems like the right way, which I'm sure was the way things like that emerged back in the day.
Yeah, I think you're right. Given that there's 4 different elements, and there's artifacts and different ways that people can actually use the cards, I already know there's a few in there which I'll be gravitate towards and thinking, yeah, that's the card I really like. There's one in particular which is Eric's Curiosa, which basically represents the name of the organization, name of the company as well. So little ones like that, but there are a few in there as well. And I don't necessarily want to spoil all the fun right now. There's a lot to the game, so we really want people to sort of experience that as they start playing it as well. Obviously, you get a little bit of insight on Tabletop Simulator, but that's not the full set, but there will be some surprises in the set for sure.
And then Overa's asking, will future sets keep the same retro fantasy theme, or are you thinking of moving into other dimensions?
Okay, I'm going to step in here right now because Eric likes to overshare tremendously. And I've seen these types of questions float around on Discord. I think it's fair to say we're tightly focused on Sorcery, the Kickstarter version of the game right now. But yeah, I think there's been some chatter about potentially some other things that could happen in the future. Right now, we need to be successful with how we go to market initially for any of this other stuff to happen. It's fair to say we talk very widely on a number of different themes, but I think right now Sorcery is our passion. That's what we need to focus on.
And part of the success is going to be getting people to play the game. So Platinum Prince is asking, what is the learning curve of the game? Is it meant to be a more in-depth competitive audience, or what's the demographic you're shooting for here?
Well, again, it's meant to be played on the kitchen table first and foremost, and while it has a lot of depth to it, like I also said earlier, from my playtesting sessions, it seems easy to, like, if I play one game with a new person and teach them how to play the game, then I've seen them have an easy time to teach another person the game with another single game. So it seems relatively easy to pick up in that way. And another thing that helps is that with the sort of iconic and simple cards of the game, and also with the kind of names of the keywords and so on, like basically the cards really do what it looks like they should do in the game. So I think that is something that people will sort of appreciate, and it will make it so that people actually want to learn. And yeah.
I did notice, and again, a bit behind the scenes information here, Eric was monitoring how many words were on each card. It's imperative that we try and keep these as simple as possible. The initial impressions that I've had with folks is when they start playing the game, when they start learning the game, they're playing the game in that same game. So basically, you don't have like a learning game where you get to grips with it. You read the cards, you understand that if you look at things like triggers and persistent effects, they're kind of minimal. Basically, like the sites have genesis effects. So when you play them, they interact with the board state at that particular point in time. So there are some more complex mechanisms within the game, such as being able to burrow and submerge. And obviously, we have things where you can flood areas according to all the different elements. So those come into play as you start evolving into the game. But I think a lot of people are actually going to sort of create a deck which tells a story. So you're going to have, for instance, a water deck where you may have some sort of things that flood, but you also have some aquatic creatures which are highly mobile, which can move from one water site into any adjacent water site very easily. And that would sort of go into the end game. You may have, say, an earth deck, where as you play the sites, you start summoning various sort of minions, small troops on each site as well. So you're continuously building up your defenses and then moving into an offensive play as well. So the learning curve really is designed that, you know, we have products, we have the pre-con decks, which are designed to be the entry point into the game itself. But we're hopeful that when people actually experience the product, they'll want to start playing with those and then suddenly swapping cards out and doing some more cool things. Again, focusing on that narrative experience.
Makes sense. And it looks like you've got some boxes right by. You've got some product nearby. You know, Platinum Prince asking also, you know, what's the name of the first set? And maybe we'll talk a little about what some of these cards might be like.
Yeah. Do you want to answer that one, Simon?
Yeah, I can do. The name of the first set is Sorcery Contested Realm. There's no subtitle, and I think if people have long enough memories and look back to other sort of card games, that's the way it kind of used to be. Now, any label that the community puts on those is absolutely up to them. But we want to basically go forward with that being very strongly branded. In the future, who's to say? And we haven't discussed anything which happens in terms of future sets or expansions or whatever else. But for right now, it is Sorcery Contested Realm. That's the product which will launch on Kickstarter.
And Just Add Misplay asks, how thick will the cards be?
I will go with a standard thickness there. I actually had a sort of immediate impulse to make them a little bit thicker in order to sort of get a little bit heavier and a little bit higher quality. But as a true collector, I play with like super tight sleeves on the inner sleeve and like double sleeved cards. And that it causes problems to go away from the standard thickness and the standard size of cards. So I think that's important to, like, all of those things that people have already should work still. But with that said, like, I will always go for we will always have the maximum quality on cards, just because the project, like the type of boutique game it is, that we will never sort of take the cheap route when it comes to that.
I think another thing which talks to that sort of quality or the vintage sensibilities is the corners as well, Eric. You've done some work to kind of develop that to be a little bit more sort of reminiscent of the earlier card games as well.
Oh yeah, the more rounded corners, that just feels great. Not sure what else I can say. Well, it both feels great to play with, and it also looks like more rounded corners. It in itself makes it feel old school, at least for me. Like it almost sort of triggers an emotion.
It works incredibly well with the full art cards as well, because all of the cards are full art. The art will extend all the way to the border. So, well, there's actually no border to the edge of the card. So I think with that in mind, overall, the product looks fantastic.
And then we have one from it's why did you choose to release the first set containing 400 different cards instead of dividing it into 3 sets, for example? Will that be the standard amount of cards in a set going forward?
Well, 400 cards, like it happened. I can't say there's a grand plan behind it, other than having a very large initial set, of course, helps it takes a lot of time for people to figure everything out. The bigger the cards are, like it's kind of exponential. It works with the number of connections between the cards. But with that said, I don't see us having a sort of standard number on sets either, or at least it's not really something that's set in stone yet. But well, personally, I like the thought of having fewer larger sets in most cases. But I don't know, might mix it up as well. But yeah, it depends on community feedback and how successful the game will be as well.
I can say that with the 400 plus pieces of art that Eric's assembled, we have a really hard time removing anyone. It's not as if, okay, we're not going to do this with this, but all the card needs to showcase, it needs to feature in the game itself. So yeah, I think it also, the nature of the game itself is you have obviously spells, minions, but you also have the sight cards. And some of those are sort of multiple alt art versions of the same card as well. So even though it looks like it's 400, when you go through things like all of the artifacts and all the other different game pieces, when you're actually selecting the card pool, it's not quite that daunting for sure. And also you're not going to pick say from all 400 cards, because you'll probably have a subset based on the sort of mechanics within the game or even the elements themselves.
A collector art house again asks, can you talk about the printer choice? Is print quality a consideration in this choice, or do you have a few options at this time because of the many TCGs that are demanding printing time?
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about this, because these are ongoing discussions that we're having at the moment. As Eric said, we want to focus on quality. We're being very pragmatic in terms of how we can source that. when you talk about printing, it's not necessarily just about the print itself. It's about the collation of the cards. It's about the packaging itself. It's about how delivered logistically around the world, because this will be a worldwide Kickstarter. And yes, there are challenges when it comes to printer times when you look at certain printers. We're also seeing there is a fair amount of choice as well. If you look at a lot of the card games available in the market, they're using a variety of different printers. So right now what we're doing is we're ordering samples, we're examining the card quality, how we feel about the product, and also looking at what their SLAs are, how they would actually be responsible for delivering that to us. So we can go to our backers with confidence and say, this is the product you've ordered. You're going to be happy with it.
Thinking of other ways to build out, Easy Kiddo, will there be metal or acrylic cards as prize for major tournaments or add-ons for Kickstarter stretch goals?
Okay, so it's fair to say what we want to try and do with this particular project is to put all the value within the booster box itself. I can talk about some other projects and just how people regard them these days. So typically when people collect cards, you buy the product and there's a lot of ancillary products that go with it. And then there's a lot of other ways that you can acquire different types of cards, which is great. And I think over time, we'll do this in a sort of a reasonable way. But when you start introducing other points, for instance, like metal or acrylic cards, those are very normally linked to certain types of projects, certain types of card games where the digital art would feature very heavily there. Remember that we're using this sort of vintage sensibility within this game. So anything we're going to do like that wants to be done with a great deal of care. I think we already have one promo card which has been available to the community in the past, and that's very similar to the base cards within there. And I'm sure that we will have, as we're working with partners, maybe some choices that people can have to actually acquire different types of cards. We're not ready at this stage to talk widely about exactly what that variety is going to look like. It's something we're going to be saving for the campaign. But I think it's fair to say we're going to take that and probably work with it in a way that works best for Sorcery. So there will be some surprises there, but we're not going to be on record right now to have like highly sort of like unusual types of cards. It's probably not appropriate.
Looking maybe beyond the campaign, post Kickstarter, will you have extra boxes for marketing, influencers, things like that?
Oh, okay. So the answer is yes. But we also have to be very careful about transparency. Whenever we are producing a product, which is a collectible product, we really want to communicate with the community as to exactly how collectible that is. That's important to us. When we're looking at post Kickstarter, our plan is not to provide Kickstarter product via other channels, first of all. So if you are going to the Kickstarter, you have an opportunity to join the campaign and to purchase product, and that will be the product available. What happens after that would be different product. Now, within the Kickstarter sort of logistical side, we need to make sure that we do have spare product on hand to a limited degree to help us deal with things like natural wastage or issues with logistics. We also do want to have product we can supply to content creators, to our partners, so they can actually understand that. Sometimes we may even want to provide this to things like grading services as well. So you do need to have extra product on hand. But what we hope to be able to do is when we reach that point to be able to publish what that figure is, so people have a great deal of confidence as to how collectible their collectible is.
Speaking of partnerships, so Christo in the Discord asked, any plans to have partnerships with one or more grading companies by the time the product is fulfilled?
Well, I think Eric's probably been responsible for keeping some grading companies going over the last few years with his Magic the Gathering collection. Inevitably, yes. I think Eric shares some slightly different thoughts in terms of grading, and it's a very modern thing to grade brand new cards. And Eric, do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So basically, the Magic the Gathering alpha elitist sort of purist collector in me thinks that it's wrong to grade anything that's less than 20 years old. But with that said, I would very much like a graded collection of Sorcery myself. So I'm not quite sure what to think about this. It's sort of changes my worldview.
Yeah, it's a shame that when people get the product, they can't just rip it open. I've seen people wear like plastic gloves, cutting them with, you know, scissors or scalpels, and it's kind of sad, really, watching people take that level of great care. But I think grading these days is it's a way of distinguishing your product as a collectible based on the quality of the production. Now, we hope to have high quality cards, and obviously there's variants, and that's why modern cards are graded this way. But like I said, hopefully it's not the main focus for collectors. A lot of the organic collectability will be baked into the box in some different ways, which we're not really ready to talk about at the moment. But obviously, grading partnerships, we do see this as important. Many games do this and people enjoy it. So I think this case of we want to support that so people can have fun there too.
Avrilis asks, with Sorcery being set up to be print to demand TCG, how can you ensure that due to the sheer amount of supply, future products will be absorbed by the market?
Okay, good question. So I want to speak to the collectors and what we call the investors here, because it's apparent that they very much have a role in any modern card game. Now, when people collect product, the notion of collecting sealed product is one thing that many people do. So they want to own products. So ultimately it goes up in value at some point in time. Now, we made the decision for this to be print to demand, which I think is probably more accurately print to the requirements of the Kickstarter, because it serves the purpose of making as many people feel part of the project as possible. Now, what I've seen with print to demand Kickstarters, and it's not a criticism of any other, game at all, is it rewards people who have sometimes jobs which allow them to get an hour at 10 a.m. in the morning to join the Kickstarter first thing, so they can press a button and they're rewarded through just forward planning. And that's noble, but it only makes a very small number of people happy. Now, when we go and say, if we were to make an estimate as to the number of boxes we would do if it was limited, we're going to be, there's two outcomes. We're either going to have not enough or too many. Chances are, from every indicator we've had so far, that if we were to go with a limited print, we feel that basically everything would sell out in the first day. That's a problem. We can't have that. We do need to have product on hand, because people are going to learn about this project from many different ways, from word of mouth, through our community, through some of the marketing activity we have to do. We have to make this project viable. We can't have a second tier product available for the people who weren't quick. So with that in mind, what we want to try and do is to give people the opportunity to join the project now. Now, given what our future plans are and what we see and how successful this is going to be for a game which is very mature, we have confidence that once this goes into our retail channels, working with retail partners, we're going to start bringing a lot more people on. So inherently, there will be an opportunity for collectability. And again, the collectability isn't about always sealed product. There's some collectible aspects to the product we're actually going to have in the booster box as well. So I really hope that answers the questions for our investor and collectors. I'm happy to talk about this in more detail, but what people have to understand is that we're running a business here. It's great that people can be successful with us, but they can't be successful in spite of us. We need to be able to actually get as many customers interested. Organically, that's better for the project, because what happens is that if more people are playing the game and they desire it, then suddenly anything which you have becomes more desirable, and therefore you feel that you have a chase collectible. No pun intended. So, but basically that's the way we think about these things. It's something we don't ignore. We do read, we go to Discord, we go to, I'm a member of very many different communities where this is talked about again and again, but we don't want to engineer collectability in such a way that it's limited, so not enough people can join the project to make it viable.
Yeah. We can also mention here that there will be some Kickstarter tiers that has more collectible things like playtest cards, print sheets, and even original art. And that's, of course, limited by the very nature of it. Like, there's only one original piece for each artwork. So there's some extremely limited things if you want to go for that kind of thing.
Yeah, and I'm sure that will scratch the itch for many people that have contacted us asking for these types of opportunities that will feature in the campaign. However, I would keep going back to the fact that the booster box is the product. This is the thing that we really want to get in front of people, because there's so much value and gameplay baked into that.
Well, speaking of getting booster boxes in front of people, at the end of the Kickstarter, how long do you think until buyers will get their booster boxes?
That's a good question. It's very hard for us to say for a number of reasons. The first reason is we don't know how successful this is going to be. Depending on the volume of the order, it dictates how quickly it can be delivered in some circumstances. So that potentially is something we need to be mindful of. Obviously, the world is a very sort of fluid state at the moment in terms of how this has happened. COVID's really sort of impacted the supply chain, and there's other things happening in the world which could do that as well. The reason that we have been sort of cautious in terms of going to market with the Kickstarter is to help us resolve and understand some of these questions. And I think ultimately what we would like to be able to do is to give a pretty solid estimate. You know, we don't want people waiting too long, but if the opportunity is to make the product better and it's better for our customers, then, you know, we would expect there to be a wait. Well, I don't have a good answer to how long that's going to be right now. Working with external parties obviously pushes that out, but we're hopeful that we can give some transparency as we go to market.
And, you know, there's been a lot of buzz about this game already, and it hasn't even gone to Kickstarter. Hollywood's asking, you know, hey, one set a year is tiny. How can you ensure players don't get bored waiting?
We can't stop people being bored fundamentally. You know, we wish that we could help everybody. And with any game, you know, you play it enough, it becomes repetitive. It's a case of we want to be able to give you the apparatus to have fun. Now, fun is a function of not just what you're doing, but who you're doing it with. And so for us to be able to support players, stores, distributors, etc., we're hoping that we can get into more different places so people can experience the game together. One set a year, I would challenge that and say it's not tiny. We see some card games where you know, distribution schedules have been upended through the issues with COVID, and as a result of that, their release schedules have suffered. But as such, the games haven't gone away; they remain strong. So I don't think it's a case of being bored. It's a case of really making sure that people have as much fun with the product as possible. But also bear in mind, if we're serious about this particular project, going to market with something which feels this way and has this quality, it does take time. You know, we do have to bear that in mind as well. And we feel the community will support us. Once they see the product, once they start playing it, they're going to understand that. And as a result of that, hopefully we can start accelerating that as we become more successful.
Well, so we got some big questions here then from Poke Shreds. Apologies for my ignorance, but when is the Sorcery Kickstarter starting?
Okay, I like the next question better. Can we go to the next one?
Oh, maybe just want to make sure the name here. This is Kukfugul again. In the Kickstarter launch, it's print to demand for the booster boxes, but will that also apply to all the other products in the Kickstarter if there are other products?
I'll take this one, Eric, and then push it over to you. To a degree, yes. If you're looking at things like the pre-constructed decks, they would be a Kickstarter product. How we actually then determine what that looks like later on, it really depends on how successful it is, and also what do distributors and stores tell us, what do they need? But they will not be the same products as offered at Kickstarter.
Oh yeah, there's like the pre-constructed decks, for example. That's a Kickstarter only thing. So something else will go to the stores. Yeah.
Okay.
What are the plans for marketing and growth in order to get the word out?
I can. Well, I should just mention first that word of mouth has been completely amazing for this game so far. So I guess that's a good start. But yeah, Simon, sorry, I interrupted.
No, I think you've hit the nail on the head. The community, really, if you look at the ascendancy of a lot of projects on Kickstarter and how they've been successful, a lot of it has been through word of mouth, through people seeing an opportunity to be part of something cool at this very early stage. That said, you know, given the fact that this is a self-funded project, we do have the ability to have strategic partnerships to help us move the needle a bit more as well. It's our hope that we can actually have a level of advertising, partner with different organizations to help us, you know, get the word out a bit more than you would normally with this type of project.
And then MLO asks, what is the plan to make this game a long-term success? A lot of TCGs are using Kickstarters as their launch platform.
Yeah, I think that's fair. So Kickstarter really is a way that you go to the world and you say, hey, look, we're working on this really cool thing, support us. Fundamentally, that mechanism has changed. Other companies use it as a way of distributing product. Some companies basically do it as the way of seeking funding for something which they're experimenting with. Now, for what we're doing with Sorcery, I think it's fair to say that this is our way of establishing credibility as to how people value what we do, but also starts those conversations or continues those conversations with strategic partners as well. You know, a lot of organizations, if you were to go to a distributor with a new card game today and say, hey, look how cool this is, they're going to say, yeah, it looks good. But that's not enough these days. They need to see sales figures. They need to see the level of interest, the engagement figures, these different types of things. We need to start building that out. And again, going back to the community, this is where we will be sort of speaking to the community during the campaign. This is a first of a few of these different types of shows we're going to be doing, Chase. I think me and you are going to be playing a couple of games on Tabletop Simulator, and we're going to have a few lessons there. We will be talking potentially to some other people involved with the project as well. But it's imperative really that the fact that Kickstarter is seen to be the first step. I don't anticipate we'll be using Kickstarter in future after this initial offering.
What about this? We got another that Poke Shreds question still floating around here. No.
Yeah, I think let's move on, shall we?
It's
get
always
this all the time. We get it all the time, and yeah, I'm tired of answering it.
We're back to this guy again. You
gotta say his name right, Chase. You said it 3 times now. Come on.
I'm sorry. I'm gonna need some help on this one. So here's the question: if you met the relentless crowd, what would you do? And you got multiple choices here. Would you play dead, run, greet them and wish them a wonderful day and pray they will let you walk on? Try to kill them all, just give up, you'll definitely die, or call Ian Miller?
I would definitely call Ian Miller on that one. That card has a bit of a story to it in that. So Ian Miller, he's quite a character actually. He has some funny emails and he sort of writes them as a poem. But the Relentless Crowd art, he just emailed out of the blue one day and asked if I had the use for this new artwork that he did. And then I said, yes, of course, because the art is so awesome. So that's how that one was made. But yeah, maybe he has some story about how you can sort of defend yourself against the crowd.
So the Relentless Crowd's card is actually a promo card, which we have given to the community. We had I think it was a promo for a photo contest we had, and people sent photographs of them playing with our print and play deck. So fundamentally, the Relentless Crowd is our fan base. So I'm going to say greet them, wish them a wonderful day, and pray they let you walk on. We really want to make sure that we have the community with us here. I think the others would be inappropriate at this stage, especially number 4. And I don't think we're ready to die yet. So we're going to go down fighting whatever. But really, we want to ally with these folks. And I think what I wanted to do at this stage, we kind of considered maybe giving some prizes out here. Erik, do you have a favorite question that you've answered so far today?
I'll probably have to look over them again.
That's fine.
Sorry. Yep.
No, absolutely. I'm going to pick actually Cuckfoggle's, that sounds so bad, question, because it made me laugh the most. So basically, they will be one winner. And what I'll do, Erik will pick a winner, and we'll pick one at random from everyone who contributed. So thank you very much to giving this. It's very useful for us to get this kind of feedback and questions at this stage. So we're very appreciative of people interacting with us.
Now, this Relentless Crowd, these guys look, look, we want to keep them on our side. We want them to not come after us here. Maybe we could answer one more question just to keep the crowd happy here. Look at this question's one. Oh, there's this one we kept passing over. So Poke Shreds, apologies for my ignorance, but when is the Sorcery Kickstarter starting? Well,
let's leave that to you to answer, Chase.
Yeah, well, let's take a look.